Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Breaking the Silence, the Conversations. And today we have from his camper van, I think, or from his works van, Barry coming to us. Barry's a chap who's been telling me via social media about his vaccine injury story, and I thought it'd be a really good idea to get him on to tell his side of the story, really. And just as we pre-recorded, it was quite interesting because one of the things that came out is that his doctors seem to be quite key in introducing the concept of this being potentially due to the vaccine. So we'll come to that. So welcome to the podcast, Barry. Thank you for joining us. Did I get that right then? Are you actually in a camper van or work van, or where are you calling from?
I'm calling at the moment from Shrewsbury.
Oh, from Shrewsbury, yes. So Barry's a 67-year-old man, and you were previously in quite good health, from what you were saying. A hormone issue where you take one tablet a day, but nothing much to write home about. And then you obviously the pandemic happened, and there were calls for vaccination to be the way out of the pandemic. The only option really that was really marketed to us as safe and effective. And so, can you run us through, Barry, sort of what were your thoughts around that time? So the campaign started in earnest. No one, even doctors, really knew that much about it. What were the sort of factors in the equation, firstly, of why you took your first jab?
Well, I work in a line of work where I'm in constant contact with the public and the store staff, whatever. Um, as a result of that, we never know, obviously, who was going to have COVID and how it's going to be spread. I might have been a carrier in that context. You just don't know. So, but okay, I'll go along with that. My wife had the vaccine first, and then I had the vaccine, the AstraZeneca one. That was in February in 2021. Then in May 2021, we had the booster, AZ again. Only a couple of weeks later, I started to feel a little bit off balance. Then finally, I pulled up in the store on my way home from work somewhere, and I had an episode where I stepped out of the van. I had a fierce pain in my head, lost my balance, nearly fell over, managed to straighten myself up and shut the van. And I thought, okay, so I walked into the store. My job there was to get some measurements from a machine. And I spoke to the manager, but my speech was slurred, and my face, my left side of my face, was numb to the touch and to the feeling. And I thought, that's odd. And the manager says to me, "What's the problem?" I explained it. He said, "You need to get yourself home and see your GP." So that's exactly what I did. We phoned up the 101 at the time to speak to them, and they said, "Come into A&E." So I went into A&E, and they did me a quick check and said they couldn't find anything actually technically wrong at the time. But when I went to see the GP, he said, "That sounds like a mini stroke. Have you had your vaccines?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, leave that for the time being. We'll come back to it." And then eventually I had to go back into hospital again, have some more tests. They did discover that I had a mini stroke. And I had a few more after that, following that.
Mm.
3, 4, maybe, or something, not sure.
So can we
Um,
just at that point, so you've never had anything like this before? You've never had these
no,
presentations of symptoms? You've
no,
never, in terms of, say, what we call cardiovascular risk factors, so did you have any of those? They are really blood
no.
pressure, cholesterol, diabetes. You didn't really have any medical history of that. So out of nowhere, you were getting these episodes. And just to, firstly, I mean, when you took the jabs, just to backtrack a little bit, what was told to you? So you're at the vaccine centre. Did they give you, run me through the sort of actual administration of the jab? Did they tell you anything about the jab? Any information?
Well, the only information I had, they said, was you might have some symptoms of COVID following up, might be flu-like symptoms or whatever. And I took that as read, and all I had was a sore arm, to be honest.
Yeah.
I had no other problem, just a sore arm. And again, the 3 months later, I
Yeah,
was
so
on it.
pretty okay in the first 3 months. So nothing but the sore arm, and then the second jab, AstraZeneca again.
Yes,
So
and it
second one,
topped things over. Yeah.
similarly a sore arm, and then any other symptoms around the time of the jab.
No, but I was on anti-statins by that point because I started them in January that year for high cholesterol reading, which was just on a high end of 5, I think, something like
So
that.
just above
Anyway,
5.
yeah, the anti-statin was on a 20 milligram dose, which was halved to 10 milligrams
Yeah,
because I get these fierce pains in my hands and feet. And on the advice of the doctor, he said half the pill, so I did, and it's working perfectly.
good.
Now, by by this time, the cholesterol level I'd had a blood test. Cholesterol level was down, so that wasn't a problem. But
And again,
having
not
had
massively high, Barry. I mean, by standards, I mean, when I started my
no,
career, cholesterol was 8. And then as my career has gone on, it's gone lower and lower and lower to the point where they're
yeah,
medicating people with cholesterols of 5 now. So hardly stroke territory at that point, and you've got no other risk factor. So when did that first episode you mentioned you were doing a bit of work, you'd gone in and had this sort of, while you were doing the measurements, how long after the vaccine, the second vaccine, was that?
2 to 3 weeks at the most.
Yeah.
The second
And at that
after the
point,
second vaccine.
had you connected the two at that point until you saw the doctor and they asked this kind of leading, almost like kind of pointing you towards it by the sounds of it, saying, "Oh, we'll leave it
Yeah,
there for now, but have you had the vaccine?" I mean, that's something I've not heard of very often. The doctor actually
yeah,
instigating that
yeah,
question, but maybe he was seeing a little bit of this, or he or she should say, was seeing a few
yeah,
people that were having these new onset neurological events. But at that point, there's no real focus on the vaccine, but you're having some crescendo mini
yeah,
strokes thereafter. You were saying, so how many of those were you having?
yeah. That's I think about 4 or 5. I think in total. Always getting the same vicious pain in the same spot in my head, which made me think it wasn't a stroke at first. I thought it was some other problem. But anyway, they said that the blood tests are showing you've had mini strokes. Well, okay, whatever that might be, enzymes or something, I'm not sure. So we just left it at that. I had 5 weeks off work where I had to literally I couldn't drive, wasn't allowed to by law. Then I got a letter to say I could drive again, so I'm fine, I'm all
What
right.
were these episodes leaving you with? Were they full on mini strokes, so you'd have complete reversal of the symptoms? You were back to
It
normal after.
gradually reversed. It's I had a numb face for a short while, for a couple of days the first time, and then each time I had mini strokes, it was the same effect. I was losing my balance, getting my speech slurred, forgetful as well, I must admit. And the left side of my face was usually numb, and my
Mm.
left arm was sometimes tingling as well. So I thought, okay, it's definitely cardio of some sort, but I wasn't sure what. The doctor said mini stroke, so the hospital said the same thing. I thought, fine, okay, we'll go along with it. And eventually I got the clearance to go back to work, and my boss was okay. He insisted I have a private medical test as well, on their company expense. The first one was a fluff because the young GP really didn't want to do it, and he made a mess of it. So we had another one. We did a Zoom consult like this with another GP with much more experience, and he said the same thing. Yes, it was a mini stroke, but you're fine to
I
go
mean, one
back
of
to
the
work.
big things, Barry, just as a sort of digression slightly, is once you have a mini stroke, is firstly you rule out, was it a big one? You have a head scan, but did they do any sort of investigative workup as to why you had the stroke? Did they look at the root cause? What I mean by that is what you should have ended up with a package of scans. So you should have had a scan of your heart to check for any valve
I
issues, a
yeah,
scan of your neck. Was that all done?
had an echocardiogram, but I didn't have an MRI on my head or anything like that.
Did you have a scan
Um,
of your neck?
no, I don't think it was.
Again, this
I
is
don't,
unusual, but I'm hearing this a lot lately. But yeah, you did have.
yeah. No, I don't think it was. It was something else. Something I'm thinking of
Yeah,
something
it's
else.
a standard issue, really. Anyone who gets a mini stroke, and I've heard it just this morning with a client of mine that they'd had stroke-like symptoms, and none of the root cause analysis was done. So clots fired from somewhere. It's either been a blood problem where you've made a clot, your blood's got
Yeah,
sticky, or it's been generated from a valvular issue, a bit of muscle in your heart that's not working, what we call an atonic ventricle, or it comes from a gammy carotid artery where there's been plaques that have built up over the years, fired off a little bit, or it can
yeah,
be an arrhythmia. So as a package of care in a mini stroke scenario, you should be getting that as standard, and usually
yeah,
walking out of the clinic with a statin and an aspirin or something similar like clopidogrel.
yeah.
And I presume that
I was
happened.
on
But
aspirin. I
hearing a
was put
lot
on
that
aspirin.
these tests aren't to look for the cause aren't happening quite disturbingly, and this has been
Yeah,
a recurring theme. That's why I've just sort of opened that part of the conversation that you just mentioned up a bit. Anyway, on to, so you've had these mini strokes. Have you ever ended up with a full stroke, or are they always kind of reverse?
no, no, just that. I went on to 75 milligram of aspirin a day to go with the antistatins as well. That seemed to clear the problem up. The next stage was I was having suddenly developed bleeding from the bowel. I don't know if that's relevant or connected in any way whatsoever, but it was quite fierce at one point, and I was seriously worried about cancer. So they
Mm.
sent me in for an endoscopy, and they found polyps, which they said one of those consultants mentioned that we've seen this before with somebody who's had the jabs. We don't know whether there's a connection there or not.
Wow, another doctor speculates.
He speculated, but that was as far as it went. He said to me, "We've removed the polyps and we're going to examine them, but and then I got a letter saying I was all clear." So what
That's
was
good.
that about? I don't know.
But again, you've
The
not
next
had
day,
prior to that, just again, we don't want to go into too much details for the purposes of the podcast, but your bowel habits and things have been okay. You'd not had an experience of rectal bleeding before that.
no, no more problems since then. So
How
whatever
long
it
was that
was,
after the Zeneca? Again, only because Zeneca we know causes clots, and we know it causes thrombocytopenia, which is when you've got
yeah,
no platelets left. So the reverse problem. So if you've got no sticky cells, then you bleed more, and then lo and behold, after your mini stroke collection, you're then having rectal bleed. So the thing is here, Barry, is we'll never know. You can never prove it, and if you don't look for things, you don't find them. Is the common thing that we're seeing at the moment. So anyway, this incident of rectal bleeding, how long was that after the Zeneca jab? Second,
that was literally about towards the end of each having the time off for the strokes.
yeah. So it was all around a similar time that your health's taken
Yeah,
a turn for the worst. And then
then
what happened, Barry? What happened then? Did you have any more jabs?
no, no more jabs at that point. I refused to have any, full stop, just in case.
So kind of
Um,
you at that point you'd equated there's a temporal correlation here.
yeah, it seemed that a bit very odd coincidence to me, and I don't believe in coincidences. So eventually, during the early part of September, late October, August, early part of September, I started to get fuzzy chest pains again, and it felt like I'd had another dose of pericarditis going on. The last time I had that was caused by a viral infection, but that was a long time ago. Anyhow, I went back to the doctors again. And I said, "Look, I'm getting chest pains here, and I'm getting other issues as well that connected with it." And he said, "Okay, we'll put you through some checks." And before I could actually get them started in the hospital in October, on the 17th of October, 10:30, I remember only too well. I was shopping in the local supermarket with my wife, and I felt giddy, not very well at all, sick, having trouble breathing. My wife said to me, "You look very pale. What's the matter with you?" And then she said I looked a bit grey. So I thought, okay, time to go home. So we jumped in the car and went home. We only had half a mile to go or so, so I wasn't worried about it. Jumped in the car, we went home, and within minutes of getting home, I fell ill completely, in form of what felt like a heart attack coming on. Fierce chest pains, blood pressure was up to 168 over 140 something, which is way too high for me. I'm normally 120 over 80 classic, and 55 to 60 BPM.
Mm.
But this was like sky high for me, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on?
Mm.
And obviously, my wife called the medics and that, and they took a good while to come out. They had to come from Worcester. I live in Redditch, so there's a good 35-minute journey there. They came out from Worcester, basically put me through a lot of tests while I was there. Before that, I spent time in a toilet being sick, removing everything out of my system, basically. Very, very hot, sweaty, then cold, and sweaty, then cold. It's ridiculous. And the amount of pain I was going through was just indescribable. Really was off the scale.
Did they end up
I
getting
thought,
you to the cath lab at Worcester? Cardiac.
sorry,
Did they get you to the catheterization lab at Worcester?
yeah, straight in, went straight through everything. Went straight through that lot and into an angiogram situation straight away.
And what did they
And
find?
they cleared out the clots and that. It just said he cleared out a series of clots and put a stent in on one collapsed vessel. And I was in there about 3/4 of an hour while they were doing that.
So he
Didn't
said there
feel
were
a thing.
lots of clots, rather than blockages in terms of they weren't narrowings. He's put one stent in. Stents are used to kind of open up a plaque that's built up over the years.
That's
But what
right.
it sounds like, and I've
Yep.
not seen the report, but it sounds like you had lots of clots in situ.
It was. There was a lot in there. And it turns out when he came around to see me the next morning, it wasn't the cholesterol clots they were removing, it was something else. So um, the cholesterol level was down to 3.7 at that point,
Well,
thanks to
even
the
at its highest,
antihistamine.
I picked that up as you said it. I mean, cholesterol of upper five isn't really high cholesterol. You know, it's
Yeah.
statine sales. ploy, let's say, in my opinion, anyway. But we'll leave that for another conversation. But I wouldn't say he'd had an established cardiac risk factor in his cholesterol of what 5.6 or 7, 5.8. But
Yeah.
that said, we'll leave that for now. So you've had these sort of multiple clots. He's commented that they're not cholesterol. He said something similar to that effect. You've ended up with one stent. And did anyone there speculate at Worcester? I used to work at Worcester myself. They were a good bunch. So
Okay.
did
Yeah.
anyone speculate potential links?
Well, the consultant himself, I can't remember the name of the chap, the doctor that did it. I did have a memory. That's another thing that's been affected is my memory over this whole situation. But the young lad chap we sent round, the registrar, he said to me, right, we've removed 6 clots from you. We're not sure what they are, but it's not cholesterol. Your cholesterol level is down to 3.7 anyway, so it's highly unlikely to be that. I said, well, what about the vaccines and that? AstraZeneca vaccines I had earlier on this year. I've had a whole series of problems. But when I described it to him, he went on my records on the computer. We went away and came back, and he said, you're right. There's a very good chance of something there relevant by way of blood clots. So clearly your blood is reactive to the vaccine and developing clots. Do you get pains in the legs? Said, yeah, a lot, especially down towards the lower half of the leg. And then my left arm goes numb and tingles, and we had all sorts of problems. And that he said, "Yep, okay, we'll have to put you on some serious blood thinners." I didn't go on the warfarin, but I put on something else, and that's what that stuff's like. I was on it for a year, and I was massively bruising every time I touched something. So it's just there were other problems as well.
Did
But
they find any
certainly,
clots anywhere else? Did they find clots in your legs?
they didn't look. To be honest, it didn't actually look.
They just put you on empirical treatment with a blood thinner.
Yeah, it did clear up over a period of time. Excuse me.
Did the doctor ever document his link to the vaccine? Because it sounds like he must have been seeing things that had obviously led to that potential conclusion. Lots of, if you're a cardiologist and you're suddenly seeing a lot of people 2 or 3 jabs down with no cardiovascular risk factors pulling out these, as he called them, unusual clots from your coronaries. It's not something he's seen every day. But did anyone ever document it or formally link it to the jab?
No, nobody ever actually come out and said it. Otherwise, I'd have tried to claim us in compensation because
So
eventually
we've had 3 doctors, push the idea out, speculate, but then not formally grasp the nettle and put their neck on the line and say, interesting.
Yeah, they're speculating, but they're not committing, and that's the trouble. I couldn't even get that commitment on paper. If I could, then I might have tried for a compensation claim. As it turned out, in the October, I was given a month off from work. Obviously, I need time out. And then in December, the local practice said, "You took time for your booster." And I thought, "Booster already? You're kidding me?" And they said, "No, we've got some other vaccine. We run out of AZ. We're not going to give you it with the Pfizer one. Was it the other one?
Yeah.
They're not going to give you that one because we haven't got those either. The only one left is a Moderna." And I said, "Will it react?" And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I've just had a heart attack." "Oh, no, it's okay. Come along, get it." So a week before Christmas, I went and had a Moderna vaccine. Felt no difference, apart from sore arm again. Evening before Christmas Eve, severe chest pains again. I thought, now what? So I couldn't understand. I was taken to A&E, went through all the enzyme checks, ECGs, all the rest of it. Everything was high. The enzyme wasn't there though, which is there for the MIs, myocardial infarction. So okay, that's interesting. I went back home again. I had about 12 hours at A&E and went back home on Christmas Eve. On December the 28th, which is just the next week, 5 days later, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. There was massive chest pains again. I thought, here we go. Felt like a full-on heart attack. Chris, my wife, she rang the ambulance again. I went to the hospital. I spent the whole day in A&E. More tests, more checks, everything else. Nothing going on. The only thing running through my mind at the time was, on December 28th in 1967, our grandmother had suffered a massive stroke and died. So I was thinking, is this her calling me or what? So anyhow, it was a bit worrying at the time, but I came away from that and there was nothing conclusive.
What was the time frame, Barry, there between we covered a lot of ground there. I just want to backstep a little bit. So you've gone into your GP's obviously flogging the Moderna booster. Was this number 3 or 4 or 5? We've lost track now. But anyway, they were marketing their latest booster campaign to line the pockets. And then you know, you've actually told them, you know, I've had this deterioration. Did they? I mean, did they go into detail there to try and sort of elucidate potential links, or were they very sort of dismissive of it? And I mean, you said that on Moderna, there's no links to it. That it's safe. I mean, were you given any detail about, you know, your history or anything about Moderna in that sort of third jab appointment?
Well, I mentioned it about just a second, the Moderna jab. I said, as it was for me to have this so close to a heart attack, and they said, yeah, you'll be fine, no problem. I thought, okay,
So it's just a
just start.
stock. Yes, it's fine. There wasn't any other information
Yeah,
exchanged. And so how long after your heart attack was that
yeah.
Moderna jab given?
We had a week after the jab, and I got chest pains.
Yeah.
Another week later, I was back in again for more chest pains. The consultant then, or the registrar, came around and said to me, well, we're not sure what's going on here with this problem. He said, but it appears you should not have been administered the Moderna jab or any jab until the middle of January at least. But why is that? He said, because no jab should be administered to anybody who's had any kind of cardiac issue within 3 months.
And was it given within 3 months of that cardiac when you went to
And
Worcester and
that
had
is
the plots removed?
actually on the NHS website. I checked that out.
Yeah. And the person who gave you that information, Barry, the person who gave that
Yeah.
information as they gave you the
When the
third
cardiac
Moderna
was
jab.
covered,
Sorry, we lost each other a little
well,
bit there,
the
Barry, I
registrar
think.
on the
Sorry.
second visit,
I was
he
just
came
saying the
around
person who
and
administered the carry on, you carry on. We've got a lag
I've lost
between
you.
us, but these things happen. Over to you.
Okay. Yeah. Had the jab at the end of in the middle of December. A week later, literally, I had the chest pains. Ended up in A&E. I didn't see anybody then. Excuse me. They just discharged me on the Christmas Eve. Obviously, they just wanted me out of the way for Christmas. So there you go. But the next week on the 28th of December, I had this serious chest pains, whatever. Wheel back in again, more tests, more ECGs, bloods, and a lot.
Yeah.
It's either a consultant or a registrar came around and we had a chat, and he said, well, you shouldn't receive the vaccine, any vaccine, but particularly not the Moderna one, within 3 months of having any kind of cardiac issue. Okay, obviously it's on the system, but I haven't had a heart attack on October 17th. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, there's an issue with repetitive strains and symptoms, whatever. Fine. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. So when I got home, I went on the NHS website. I just typed in Moderna vaccine, myocardial infarction, or whatever, cardiac, and it came straight up. Somewhere on the NHS website is a warning to all people: do not administer the Moderna vaccine to anybody that's had a heart attack within 3 months.
How do you feel about
And that
that? I
was
mean,
there in black and white.
yeah, how do you feel about that? I mean, you've obviously gone into a room and I mean, was it a doctor? Was it a nurse? Was it a healthcare assistant that's batted away your concern? You've obviously highlighted to them that you've had these health issues. They've
Yeah,
just given you a stonewall no, it was nothing. It's absolutely fine. But was it a nurse? Was it a doctor?
I think it was a nurse because I rang the surgery. I got a text message saying you need another booster. I thought, seriously. So I phoned them up and said, is this safe? And she put me on, I think I'm pretty sure it was one of the nurses. And she said, oh, I'll be okay, no problem at all. So clearly she hadn't been advised of the risk.
And therein lies the
Uh,
problem, Barry, is that you've got people administering these jabs who don't know. You know, the
yeah,
firstly, they don't know what's in the jabs. Secondly, they don't know the up to date. You know, and my conversations in coffee rooms have always been met with blank faces, even at the basic level of what's in these jabs. You know, that they're not even vaccines, that they're, you know, gene-based therapeutics with a novel platform of technology behind them. You know, and people have a right to know that. People had a right to know that we were giving these drugs that had never been used in humans outside of clinical trials. You know, and
yeah,
it should have been told them. But even nurses to this very day, with the latest spring booster campaign, don't know this very basic stuff what's actually in the vial that they're injecting into you. They're just saying, oh no, there's no link. How did you feel about that when you heard from the consultant that you shouldn't have had it?
disgusted.
Yeah.
Clearly there's a lack of education and training in the system where that sort of thing is being administered. That kind of training should go out as soon as they start pushing the booster timings, if you like.
Particularly when you're a
Like,
COVID vaccine nurse, particularly when that's your special area, you know, vaccinated. And
yeah,
the problem is this whole era made a lot of volunteers, vaccinators. You know, the people giving the jab were often volunteers or people who'd done a very short module around
yeah,
vaccinating. You know, even the basics of intramuscular injections were being ignored, seemingly inexplicable. So when you stick a needle in someone's arm, you're supposed to pull back on the syringe to check you're not in a blood vessel. It's an intramuscular, not an intravascular injection. But very, very quickly into the process, you've got these volunteers jabbing people all around the arm. That, you know, I've seen jabs at the point of the shoulder tip here, which is way away from where you should be giving it, almost in the bicep, almost in the tricep, and not aspirating. So, you know, potentially giving an intravascular bolus of this novel technology straight into a blood vessel to be biodistributed. So, yeah, I mean, how's the story end, Barry? What's your health like now? Did you have any more?
I now get very short of breath. I can't climb the stairs like I used to. At the time I had the heart attack, shortly after that, I was back on my feet and I was walking where we live is quite hilly. Not massively hilly, but 1 in 18 slopes and whatever. And I had a circuit. I was getting myself back to a fast walk, no problem at all, getting really back on song. I had to take quite a bit of time out of work, and the company I was working for at the time, they said, the doctor said, go back to work, light duties only, which means servicing basically, oil and machines and things like that, going around with a van, driving. In my line of work, that's okay. Light work is light work. They put me straight back on because at the time I was the only guy in the company who could actually weld properly. They put me back on, putting these heavy steel buffers back on the walls of freight depots and whatever. They weigh 102 pounds each. And they're trying to get me to lift them after all I've been through. And I said, well, where's the young lad you promised me? Oh, sorry, mate, they're too busy. So there you go.
Nothing like being looked after at work, is there? I know that feeling well. So where are
where
we
I'm
today? Are you back to sort of close to good health now, or?
sort of, I wouldn't say it's brilliant. It's knocked me for six, there's no doubt about it. A couple of years down the line, I can't do the walks anymore. Well,
Yeah.
after the second set of problems with the vaccine and after that last Moderna vaccine, I found that I was struggling to get up the hills, doing the walk and everything else, and I've had to cut that on the head. I struggled to get now up to the doctor's surgery, which is up a long, gentle slope hill. Get to the top of the hill, I'm out of breath. I don't know what's called that exactly, but it's a strange coincidence again, straight after the vaccine.
And you mentioned
Um,
cognitively now you get, you know, mentally your memory, for example. I think you
yeah,
said earlier about
yeah.
personality change. What made you say that? Is that your own? Is that your own recollection, or is other people saying that you've changed?
I think my wife has something to say about
Yeah.
that.
So what's
Yeah,
she saying? I mean, jokes aside, what is she saying? So she, as somebody who's known you through the years, has suddenly noted a change in your what? What when you say personality?
I think uh, it's hard to explain really, but the mental attitude towards life now has definitely changed. I want to retire, but I can't, because she won't let me. We're constantly bickering about silly little things, you know, and that's irritating. That's maybe something completely different. I don't know, but
How's she been actually? How's the other half been? She been okay with the
she's
jabs?
okay. Yeah, she's good. She's come through the vaccine okay. It hasn't affected her too much.
And therein lies the
So
big mystery in all of this, Barry, is that, you know, I know people who've had 9, 8, 7, and they're absolutely fine. And yet I know people who've
yeah,
had 1 or 2. It's destroyed their life. They're disabled with constellations of, you know, symptoms that are just inexplicable other than the vaccine. But this is the issue we've got. How do you prove it? How do you prove it? And the constant rebuttal I get from my professional colleagues is correlation doesn't equal causation. How do you prove it? But then these same colleagues are blaming everything, all and sundry, on long COVID, which is a concept, really. It's an you know
yeah,
all-encompassing explanation. It's the COVID, but they can't really compute the fact that, you know, spike protein from COVID is bad, yet the mRNA-induced spike protein, or AstraZeneca, it's a slightly different technology, but ultimately it leads to your body producing spike protein, which has lots of negative effects across numerous systems. How they can't compute that spike protein, the mRNA genetically engineered spike protein, can't be equally responsible. It's just a blanket no, isn't it? Like you said, you've had a few bites from doctors saying potentially there is a link. Has any of your GPs, you know, any links there? Has anyone kind of put their hands up at the surgery and said, look, you know, you could have a case here, Barry?
no, to be honest, I
Sums it up
don't think they want
nicely.
to know.
No.
No,
No.
no. I've had two GPs. I'm registered with one GP, and there's another one that does a lot of work. I actually prefer him. We work really well, and he's very good at explaining everything to me. But they will not commit to accusing on the vaccines. That they will
Yeah.
not commit to that point. probably it's more than their jobs are worth or whatever.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
can you
know.
imagine what it would open up, if they acknowledge your vaccine injury is to do with the vaccine and then every other one, that's in the same, and this is not just, four-figure, small rare side effects. As a cohort, there's hundreds of thousands of you. And yet, if
Mm.
no one, like I said, to a client earlier, is that if people don't look for these things or don't want to document the links to the vaccine, then you're not going to collate the data that builds a strong case that there is a real issue here with this technology. I know doctors right at the beginning didn't know what the yellow card system was, let alone how to complete it. You're not going to capture good clinical governance, particularly with a novel drug, if you're not recording these events. And they were coming thick and fast for me.
Yeah,
I was working in
I
a little
think
surgery in Cornwall, seeing them pretty much daily, sometimes twice a day, where there was
sorry,
a temporal link. There was a temporal link. I was fine until I had this
you're
jab, and then
frozen.
this, that, and the other happened. So, but the cohort of doctors around me at that time were just very hands over ears, suffering from a bad case of what I call ostrich syndrome. Keep the head in the sand and not think about that link, which is
Yeah,
just bad medicine, really. Bad medicine. Differential diagnosis is what we do.
yeah,
You have
yeah.
a patient come in with symptoms, you get a list of potential
Okay. Well, the other
explanations
problem
for
I
it.
have, right? Okay. Well, in terms of today's health, I've got memory lapses. There's no doubt about that at all. And I had the same thing during all the issues I have with the COVID vaccines and that. My memory went to hell. Absolutely useless. I couldn't remember anything from day to day, really.
And that's really
Um,
common, Barry, really common.
Nowadays, sorry.
That's really common, the cognitive issues around it, people's
Yeah,
memory, brain
yeah,
fogs, memory lapses, feeling as if they've aged, or really debilitating fatigue is another one.
yeah. Well, when I was having a mini stroke, so I was having the same pain, the fierce pain in the same point of my head. Nowadays, if I just cough hard, I get the same thing. I get a serious pain in my head, just up this point here.
Yeah.
It feels like someone driving a 6-inch nail into your head with a hammer. And sometimes I end up on my knees from the pain. It's just almost a blackout. So obviously that's clearly not good. And I don't
Did
know
they ever
what's
do
caused
any
that.
imaging? Because you said something earlier about you didn't have an MRI. Did they ever do a CT scan when you go through the big circle?
No,
They
I've
didn't do a
had
CT.
MRIs. I had MRIs. That's for the pituitary problem, and that was a while ago. I keep asking for one right now because it's a problem, but they're just ignoring it.
See what I mean
So it's
about the
very
whole
difficult.
if you don't look, you don't find? Because what that MRI scan might show is something that might add some evidence and credibility to the links between the vaccine. So
Yeah,
ostrich syndrome strikes again. I mean, you were mentioned earlier, you were in my hometown of Redditch. What are your friends and family looking around? Your friendship circles, family circles? Are you all starting to make the links now? Do you know any people who are suffering similar reactions, or is it you in isolation? Or
no, I don't think I do. I don't think I do know anybody. To be honest, we haven't got many close friends in the area. I've got a few casual friends, and most of my friends are spread out across the country. To be
all right.
honest,
Yeah, that's
but
what we're seeing there now. People are starting to connect the dots now in their friendships, and they're seeing a lot of people that have suddenly developed symptoms after the vaccine, or they're suddenly noticing a lot of cancer around in their, friendship circles, social circles, etc., etc. Any links like that?
there are a few. Yeah, there are a few. A couple of guys gone down with prostate cancer. I don't think there's any link to that, but that's one of those things. A chap I do know who's gone through an awful lot. He's old, slightly older than I am. He's an HEV driver. He's been stopped because he had a huge stroke, and lots of little ones before it. So I know he said he had issues with the vaccine, feeling sick and flu-like symptoms and things like that. But you're going back to the time when we were having the vaccines at the time.
Yeah, but again, in your case, it demonstrates it nicely that if doctors aren't willing to document it, aren't willing to report
Yep.
it, aren't willing to even privately mention that this is highly likely. And actually, as a scientific principle, it's difficult to pin it. It's difficult to pin anything. It's like when somebody dies, it's a best guess. You believe that they died of A, B, and C. You weren't there at the moment, but like I say here with diagnosis, it's the best. It's a balance of probabilities, and then once you've sort of honed in on the differential diagnosis, you then prove it by doing scans. But if you're not having the scans, you don't get to confirm that diagnosis from the list of differential diagnoses. So interesting story you've got. Yeah, you've got a hue of angelic hue about you the last 5 minutes. The sun's come out in Greenwich by the looks of it. So
Yeah.
all that's
Somebody
left to
called me
say.
downstairs.
Yeah, exactly. All that's left to say, thank you, Barry. Really, thank you for getting in touch. Thank you for sharing your story. It's I'm not gonna say either way. I think people know my position on this. That that you can't say never here. The same way we
Mm.
can't prove that it is, doctors can't prove that it isn't. And where does
Yeah.
the burden of proof lie there? No one really knows. It's somewhere in the middle. But
Bit
if
of a
no one
clever
wants to talk
question, isn't it?
about it, then how are we ever gonna there's a thing in medicine where you have to, if we admit mistake, if it's called the duty of
Yeah.
candor. So if we do make a mistake,
Uh,
particularly one on the magnitude I fear that this will end up being in 10 years, looking back, where were the doctors? Where was I often get told I'm affecting negatively the confidence in the profession. Well, putting your head in the sand does that for itself. If you've got doctors that you
Yeah.
trust, not giving you the scans, not acknowledging on paper to help you, this could have been a million times worse. I mean, it's bad enough from what you told me, but could have been a million times worse. And you couldn't be working now, for example, it's left a lot of people like that unable to work, function as they previously did.
Yeah.
And then they enter the vaccine damage payment scheme only to be told, again, absolutely nothing to do with the vaccine, or it's up in your
Yeah.
head, or it's mental health. And this is the recurring theme that I get. But Barry, I'll let you get on with your day. Thank you ever so much. And it looks like it's a sunny one in Redditch.
It is. Yep. Lovely.
Go and enjoy the
Lovely.
rays, get some
Thank
vitamin
you
D
very
into
much.
you. All right, Barry, we'll get this out soon. And thank you ever so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks. If you can send us a link, I'll be useful to see it. Thank
I
you.
will send it straight to you to edit it as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Good
Take
to
care,
speak to
Barry. All
you.
the
Thank you.
best.
Bye bye.
Bye, mate. Bye.